Hey folks, it's Patriot Nurse. What were the top 5 deadly diseases of the Civil War? What were the key causes of death during the war between the states? Was it violence on the battlefield, or was it something different back home? Let's get started. So if you've ever watched the movie Gone with the Wind, which if you're a proud American citizen, you totally should, you'll note that there are several instances in the movie where disease makes itself known. And so we're going to speak about that today because of the diseases that are mentioned in Gone with the Wind, at least 2 of them have made this list. So why does this matter? Well, if you're looking at a prolonged grid down and you're looking at a case of complete upending of law, order, and civilization that happened here on the soil of the United States, you're pretty much looking at 1861 to 1865 and the dynamics that happen when you have massive power grabs and when you have great numbers of people moving from one part of the country to the other, and also large numbers of people coming into the country from out of the continental United States and being shoved into the populace without any type of screening. And that is what was happening actually at the time. During the war between the states, we're going to see that 5 major diseases and processes were present throughout the camps during the Civil War, both in the Confederate and the Union side. And we should pay attention to these because what happened in the past can be a great blueprint for looking at the future. So the 5 most deadly diseases during the war are based on my reading of several different primary source documents, and we'll go over those actually. They are: number 1, dysentery; number 2, typhoid; number 3, pneumonia; number 4, gangrene; and number 5, malnutrition. So when it comes to primary source documents, I like to try and reference things that were first-hand accounts and witness testimonies from people who were actually there. And to that end, one of my favorite books so far is it's called Kate, the Journal of a Confederate Nurse. I actually picked this up at the bookshop at Chickamauga Battlefield, and I've really enjoyed it. Kate Cumming was a Confederate nurse from Alabama, and the things that she records that she saw and also that she worked with throughout the course of the war, it really bears to keep in mind just how fragile the peace that we have here in the United States is and what we enjoy here now compared to what people suffered tremendously through in the past. So let's talk about dysentery. This was also called the flux, the bloody flux. And dysentery was a pretty much universal experience by soldiers on both sides of the war in the camps. And why is that? Because this type of dysentery, which most likely based on the reports that we have was Shigella as opposed to amoebic dysentery. Shigella is a bacteria, whereas amoebic dysentery is amoebas. And so it's likely that Shigella was moving through the camps because the water supplies were contaminated. And when you consider that in absence of conventional sanitation, like what we are blessed to experience now with wastewater treatment and water purification, that the majority of the soldiers were bathing in the same water that they were drinking and also dumping sewage in. So you can only imagine how it just really was this perfect petri dish of ick. And so what happened, because it was a fecal oral disease, it was contracted through contaminated food and water, and then this diarrhea that would show up with mucus and blood just draining men of their hydration completely bottomed out their blood pressure, and ultimately they passed away. So what did they do for dysentery back then? Well, not a whole lot. In many cases, if they had opium, tincture of opium, which is laudanum, they would use that for diarrhea. But particularly in the South, because of the blockades and because of the total warfare that was genocidal and that was committed by the federal troops, they didn't have access to pretty much anything. So what was used was actually the herbal of old remedies. And these herbal remedies included various different things that are present in the South from a vegetation standpoint. Sumac was one of them. Red raspberry leaf was another one. Yellow dock was another one. There are several different herbs that were utilized in order to keep the bloody flux at bay. The second disease was typhoid fever. Now, this actually makes a cameo in the story of Gone with the Wind, whether you read the book or you watch the movie, of course. Scarlett's mother contracts typhoid while nursing the neighborhood floozy, Emmy Slattery. Typhoid was making its way through the camps, but also through the South, in particular because of the water supply contamination. And typhoid has a very interesting progression of the disease. It tends to, unless mitigated, show up in 3 distinct stages throughout effectively 3 weeks. And one of the key differentials actually during the second week is the pea soup poop. The poop of people, the feces turns to a bizarre color of green. There's also high fever and a rash that shows up in about a third of people. It just depends on what your sample size is, but it can be very, very deadly. And you're looking at multi-system involvement, not just of the digestive tract, but if it's left unchecked, you can get respiratory involvement. So basically, people have their entire system completely swamped with the bacteria that caused typhoid. And so because this was fecal oral and because this was contaminated water transmitted, a great number of men perished in the camps because of it. The third is pneumonia. Now, pneumonia, of course, we have a decent amount of familiarity with nowadays, but right now around me it is cold and wet and yucky. And being cold and wet and yucky is not fun in the best of times, let alone when you are sleeping outside with no shoes and no tent to cover you, nothing to get out of the elements, which was the experience of a great number of Confederate soldiers. And it is recorded actually in the Journal of Kate Cummings that a great many of these men who were coming in, particularly in 1863, a great many of these men who were coming in and who she was nursing, they didn't have shoes. They had precious few clothes. They had no tent. They had nothing to shelter them from the elements. And of course, they're fighting malnutrition on top of this and exerting themselves by walking dozens of miles a day, marching dozens of miles a day. And it was really just a horrific series of experiences for these men. So it's little wonder then that given those circumstances, they were prime candidates for contracting pneumonia, and a great many of them did. Also, when you consider that risk factors for pneumonia include malnutrition and also include deficiencies in vitamins and minerals that we just take for granted here nowadays, a lot of people were perishing from the secondary effects of malnutrition. So if you haven't watched my video yet on the key mistake that people make in their long-term food storage, you definitely should watch that video after completing this one. One of the things that was a reality for much of the South, particularly with the genocidal and devastating warfare that was waged against them, which we take for granted now, that the way that Sherman conducted warfare and Grant conducted warfare, that destroying citizen populations and that turning out little tiny children and men and women to freeze to death was normal. But at the time, civilized warfare, war rules were adhered to. The rules of war were something that was considered effectively a universal norm by waging war in civilized Western countries. And that met its end in the United States in 1861. So when you consider that not just the military population was dying from pneumonia, but also the civilian population. The civilian population in the South was devastated, particularly in Mississippi through and Georgia and Alabama through some of the slash and burn and the raids and just the looting of foodstuffs. People were starving to death. And because they were starving to death, their bodies could not mount effective defenses against diseases that otherwise would not have killed them. The fourth is gangrene. Now, gangrene, the flesh rot, so to speak, this is something that is a casualty not just of the realities of the time, of lack of sanitation, but also a lack of understanding on how to mitigate the spread of bacteria once it had gotten into a body. And when you consider that many of these amputations that were being conducted in field hospitals, they were being done with instruments that had certainly not been sterilized to the degree that we would consider satisfactory nowadays. But also these were, in some cases, hasty amputations, and these amputations were being conducted with very few supportive blessings of medical infrastructure. So when it comes to things like bandages just universally available that we're used to in modern nursing and in modern hospital care, that was not a thing. In some cases, lint was having to be picked off of old rags in order to make bandages. And so the lack of sanitation and also the lack of good quality bandages available to bandage and wrap these dressings and to dress these wounds was a serious problem. Furthermore, from the standpoint of wound care, tetanus also set in to a great degree because these wounds were left effectively to sit and fester, and because they weren't cleaned and because they were, being left out in many cases, these men who were immobilized or who sustained battlefield injuries from artillery, these were men who were, left on the battlefield for days in many cases. And so by the time that they were able to receive appropriate medical attention, it was just too late. So how did physicians and nurses make do when they didn't have things like bandages and they didn't have things that we have now and we take for granted like antibiotics? Well, they utilized herbs. Actually, Dr. John Christopher, who founded the School of Natural Healing, a school of which I'm a graduate, he has a protocol specifically for mitigating and managing gangrene in times where there are no conventional pharmaceuticals or hospitals available. And there are two herbs that he utilizes extensively for this. One is marshmallow root and the other is bayberry. So we've already touched on number 5 a little bit, but I want to expand on this. The malnutrition and scurvy, which was showing up, was a direct result of the inability of people to get the food, the nutrients that they so desperately needed. And there's another factor to consider as well. We are not so much used to this in our economy nowadays because most people are getting their food from a grocery store. But back in the day, most people were growing part of their food and trading for what they couldn't grow. When you look at what happened in the South, particularly because the vast majority of able-bodied men went to the front lines or went to serve, the only people left to tend the homestead were women and children and whatever servants they had with them. Because of this reality, there were large swaths of farmland that simply did not have the manpower and the labor to cultivate them. In many cases, the invading federal troops burned these lands. They also destroyed and burned barns and destroyed many types of farming implements to the point where they couldn't be used, just to try and make life miserable for people. There are many instances that are told of invading federal troops that after they had burned farms and sacked foodstuffs and committed violent acts towards the women and violated the women and then turned from the white women to the black women, that once they had completely devastated people, then they left them out in the cold to die. And so when you have no ability to keep yourself warm and you have no ability to produce your own food and you've been blockaded and your money is effectively worth nothing and you can't get any help from outside, you're really left to completely self-destruct. And so a lot of people were not able to feed themselves. A lot of people were reduced to eating weeds, what they could. A lot of women, because they were home alone with small children, resorted to prostitution in order to feed their small children. And this was a really unfortunate reality of these experiences of war. And so again, friends, I hope that what we've covered today has been helpful for you, not necessarily from a cheerful aspect, but from a scholastic and a historical review of the consequences of what happens when a breakdown in society manifests itself and what disease looks like and what that experience feels like for people. And so if you're interested in learning more, I definitely recommend this book. This is called Kate, the Journal of a Confederate Nurse, and it's about Kate Cumming. So this is her published journal of her firsthand experiences during the battles that took place in North Georgia and also in Southeast Tennessee. Friends, I hope this video was interesting and insightful for you. I hope you derived benefit from it. If you did, please share this video with one person who you know would be benefited from it. Also, if you enjoy the free content that comes to you here on the Patriot Nurse channel on YouTube, please make sure and click that subscribe button and the bell button if you enjoy these videos for free and you'd like to keep getting them. If you're interested in learning more about the diseases of old and what the traditional and herbal treatments were before modern pharmaceuticals, I've actually written a course that's available online. It's the Herbal Preparedness course. And you can take this course at your own pace. You can stop, rewind, repeat it as much as you need. And all the information is available in the links below at the website, thepatriotnurse.com. I hope the video was helpful for you. Have a very blessed week, y'all. For now, it's Patriot Nurse signing off, and I'll see y'all later. Bye.